March 6, 1944. 26,000 feet over the Elbe River, east of Braunschweig. Frost webs the inside edge of the canopy. Captain James Don Blakesley's gloved hand drums on the throttle of his P-51B Mustang. The Merlin's smooth hum, a living animal in the cockpit. Far ahead, sunlight flashes along a ribbon of silver. 400 B-17s and B-24s stepping the sky in layered combat boxes, props glittering like coins as they crawl toward Berlin. In the radio, the 8th Air Force's cadence is clipped and calm. But you feel the current under it. The sense that today they are hauling daylight into a city the Reich promised was out of reach. "Gentlemen," Blakesley had told the line at Debden, his 4th Fighter Group drawn up beside their long-legged Mustangs, "you are going to Berlin. You will not turn back." He carries that sentence in his jaw now, a tight set under his oxygen mask. On his wings, flights of Mustangs from the 4th and the 357th, the Yoxford boys, just in from Leiston, shake out into cover positions, contrails curling like chalk lines in a blue gymnasium. Below, at the edge of your headphones, comes the distant industrial thunder of the bomber stream, Wright Cyclone and Pratt & Whitney engines pulsing in a slow heartbeat. The Mustang's Merlin, a Packard-built Rolls-Royce V1650, stitches a different note, high and purposeful. Slung under the wings are 108-gallon paper drop tanks, light as milk cartons until the gasoline inside makes them heavy and merciful. Those tanks are why these fighters are here. Because of them, and because of Doolittle's new order, don't sit glued to the bombers, go kill the Luftwaffe. The escorts can reach out, draw a circle around the bomber stream, and then range ahead like bird dogs. Yellow flight, fuel check. The clicks come back. 2 3/4. 3 7/10. 4 same. The sequence is practiced. Burn the externals first, keep the internal tanks for the fight. Through the windscreen, the world tilts. Sunlit cotton to the north, a ragged brown river of fields beneath. Then tiny knitting needles of flak rising in exploratory handfuls. Lazy at first, black puffs marking range. Then the sound that changes everything. A different kind of chatter on the radio, sharper and closer. A calm, West Country voice, clipped by a mask and wind. "Tally-ho, bandits, 1 o'clock high." The Mustangs turn as one, a long, disciplined sway of wings. Out of sun glare come the angles and shadows that every American pilot carries in a private gallery. A prickling cruciform of Messerschmitt Bf-109Gs, slab-nosed FW-190As with fat radial engines, climbing with rude confidence toward the bombers. The Luftwaffe aces have made a career of this moment. Diving through escorts that ran short of legs, blasting past P-47s or P-38s that had to turn home at the German border. They had laughed about the little friends who never stayed for the dance. Blakesley guns the throttle, and the Mustang answers with an elastic surge, the Merlin's supercharger spooling like a long breath. On his right, a yellow-nosed FU-190 flashes past in a curving climb to set up the old murderous tactic. Frontal attacks on the bomber boxes, a method honed by men like Egan Mayer. A second formation of 109s, heavy with 30mm Mk108s and rocket tubes, is shaping for the head-on, timing the wall of steel that will meet the fortresses as they cross the flak corridor. "Not today," Blakesley mutters. He kicks rudder, rolls, and pulls, the G-forces nailing him to the seat. The P-51's laminar flow wing slices the thin winter air. The nose settles with that uncanny Mustang poise. 2, clear my high right. A shape fills the windscreen, grows. The enemy pilot's canopy flash, the spinner like an auger. Blakesley squeezes. The 650s bark in a braided roar, red tracers walking in a short, intelligent line. The Focke-Wulf jitters, coughs smoke, flips inverted, and scythes down through a contrail. Across the sky, the rest of it happens, sudden, bright, and loud. The 357th's Major Leonard Kit Carson drags a 109 through a barrel roll and pins him at the bottom. The German's black cross momentarily posed like a target from a carnival tent before it blurs into smoke. Captain Clarence Bud Anderson corkscrews through a swarm, tight and smooth, splitting a rotten of 109s that had counted, wrongly, on meeting thunderbolts low on gas. "They're not going home," someone says over the net, the voice disbelieving and joyous. "They're staying with us." The bombers, those silver factories, plod on. You can see the lead navigator toggling drift corrections, the toggliers in the noses checking pins on safety wires, the waist gunners sweating under sheepskin and flak vests. Ahead, the horizon thickens with brown. Berlin. On the German side, the prep table had been laid with the usual confidence. Jagdgeschwader 11, Jagdgeschwader 1, veterans from Jagdgeschwader 26, the Abbeville boys, had been briefed to bounce the escorts, slash the head, and then pick bones from the bomber formations. But the timing is off now. The Mustangs, with fuel to burn, are not chained to the bombers. Flights slide out in spears, lancing ahead of the stream to chew up rendezvous points where 109s gather their speed. Others drop low and rake the climbs. A pair from the 4th breaks high and late, rolling behind a section that thought itself unseen. The Luftwaffe formations kink, unravel. Radios fill with clipped calls that sound like questions. In the right wing, a 357th pilot glances left as he pops his drop tanks, watching the wobbling cylinders fall away and twirl like kicked barrels. He closes the gap on an WWII 190 that is turning too hard, bleeding speed. The German pilot's head jerking left and right under its hood as if searching for a favorite song that isn't playing. The Mustang slides inside, unhurried, and the pilot feels the odd peace that comes in these seconds, the fierce geometry of flight becoming simply lines and points. He presses the trigger and draws a short, straight sentence in fire. The first bombs begin to fall toward the Ringbahn. Toward the ball-bearing plants and marshalling yards the planners had drawn in pencil on maps a world away. And overhead, the laughter is gone. In squadron messes from Husum to Oldenburg, men will say that day they saw something strange. A long-range American fighter that arrived fresh in the afternoon and then kept coming, even after Berlin, even on the way home. The contrails trail east like torn white parchment, and for a beat the radio is only oxygen hiss and distant happy swearing. Then the net crackles again, calm returning, leadership in the gaps. Debden, this is Wolf leader, dragging high cover to the front of the stream. Second element, free hunt on the right flank. What you are hearing is not just bravado. It is a doctrine, only weeks old, being made into muscle memory under fire. On January 6, 1944, Lieutenant General James H. Jimmy Doolittle took over the 8th Air Force. He had led the 1942 Tokyo raid and knew the currency of audacity. But in England, he brought a change that seems small on paper and colossal in practice. He told his fighter group commanders to abandon the old escort dogma. They were no longer to fly in tight defensive halos around the bombers, bleeding speed and initiative. They would attack. The first duty of our fighters, he told them in essence, is to destroy the German Air Force. The Mustangs were the instrument perfect for the sentence. The P-51B and WWII with their Packard Merlin engines had the legs. Clip on two 108-gallon drop tanks and the numbers turned alchemical. You could depart the green hedges of East Anglia before dawn, hook up to the bomber stream over the Zuiderzee, Shepherd it across the Ruhr, range ahead to Berlin. Trade your externals for speed and fight for 20 minutes. Then rejoin the stream and still have fuel in your internal tanks to duel and escort all the way back across the boundary of safer sky. For pilots whose war had been ring-fenced by range markers, it felt like a door ripped from its hinges. Within that new space, tactics mutated fast. The 4th and 357th practiced bent finger formations, finger 4 variants, which gave longer sight lines and mutual support at the speeds the Merlin loved. The groups developed rolling rendezvous with the bomber divisions, checking in with the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd as blocks of cover. Elements peeled out like wolves, nosing along the stream's front edge to pounce on climb corridors where Jagdgeschwader assembled. On the radio you heard new words, free hunt, rhubarb, and old ones with a different emphasis. It wasn't stick with the forts anymore. It was kill the interceptors. The Luftwaffe aces were not fools. They were men with hundreds of WWII missions from the Channel Coast and, some, Eastern Front. Knights of a shrinking realm. Their doctrine had evolved too. To counter the heavy bomber boxes, they had built frontal attack schools and Sturmgruppen, armored FW-190A8 R2 Sturmböcke, with 30mm cannon and extra plates around the cockpit, meant to bore in at close range and smash bomber fuselages like eggs. Messerschmitt Bf-109G6s hung 20mm gun pods and rocket tubes under their wings, the ugly WFR-Gear. 21 rockets meant to explode inside a combat box and scatter it like pigeons. Commodores like Walter Oesau, Gruppenkommandeur like Major Heinz Baer, Staffelkapitane who had once hunted casually in blue summer skies. These were not men inclined to yield their craft to American interlopers. And yet, the geometry of this day and the days that followed betrayed them. The head-on attacks required careful timing and altitude. Storm tactics demanded assembly and discipline. But from February's big week through March's Berlin strikes, the Mustangs learned to cut the enemy's throat not at the point of attack, but at the gathering of breath. 4th FG elements would angle up sun, high, and quartering. 357th pairs went lower, eye level with German airfields and climb lanes. A G6, rolling out of a cloud to build speed for a frontal, would find a P-51 sliding into its 6 at 200 yards with no drama at all. Just a tap of rudder, a 3-second squirt, and then a parachute blossoming like an obscene flower against the winter wheat. You can picture it now on March 8th and March 9th as well. Berlin again, under the crosshairs. Major Frederick Boots Bless had said years later that air combat is a business of energy. Who has more, who spends less. In March 1944, the Merlin-Mustang partnership is energy in a bottle. Slippery, fast in a dive, steady in a climb, and, crucially, well-behaved when firing. At range, the 50s throw a hose of tracer that lets a good pilot correct his aim onto a crossing target. Up close, they bite through inboard wing roots and engine cases with ugly certainty. One scene stays with you. A yellow-tailed FW-190 of a Sturmstaffel refuses to break. Its pilot has tasted fortresses and wants another taste. He bores toward a B-17 element, wings rocking under 30mm recoil, the fort's tail guns cutting white zippers through the air. A 357th two-ship slides in from 10 o'clock high, a floating patient move, then drops its noses in sequence, lead, then wing. The first burst strips paint from the German's port wing. The second meets him as he tries to roll. He doesn't explode. No, he simply comes apart, the tail drifting left like a shed shirt, the forward fuselage flopping over in a greater wind. At the debriefs that evening, the talk will be strange. Debden's operations room takes calls from squadrons landing near dark with fuel left in their internal tanks. After Berlin, Leiston's chalkboard shows the 357th's claims and losses, and in a corner an armorer notes in pencil which gun bays fired clean, which jammed. There is laughter, but it is not the old barroom laughter. It is quieter, like the sound a man makes when he realizes a job that was unthinkable yesterday will be his work every day from now on. If you step back with the historian's eye, those chalkboards are a hinge. Air superiority is not a medal, it is a habit. And on days like March 6th, 8, and 9, that habit begins to form. Mustangs ranging, slashing, and then, because Doolittle allows it, leaving the bombers at need to hunt the hunters further forward. The Luftwaffe still fights. It will fight with desperate innovation, air-to-air rockets, ramming orders for some storm units, and soon jet experiments. But the pilot cadre is bleeding out at altitude, and irreplaceable time is being burned just climbing into formation under a sky that now belongs, more hours of the day than not, to the Merlin. They had laughed, some of them, months before, at briefings along the channel where the talk was of thunderbolts too heavy and lightnings too fragile, of Americans who drank coffee and blasted country music and would never stay for the evening round. The laughter had sounded like superiority because it was superiority, earned on the summer circuits of 1941 to 42, when the world still felt elastic. But in spring 1944, the laugh has an echo in it. Listen to the names in the air that month. Don Gentile of the 4th, a showman who still, when it counts, flies like a surgeon. John Godfrey, whose calm on the radio settles younger men. Bud Anderson, smooth where others are harsh. Kit Carson, who will in time warn green kids not to chase every target they see. These are not ghosts invented after the fact. They are men finding in the P-51 a rightness that turns their own skills from acts into systems. On March raids, they pull apart Rotten and Schwerme like watchmakers, not because the Germans have forgotten how to fight, but because the Americans can now choose the terms of the fight. Altitude, speed, sun position, fuel state. Across the air, the German aces answer with everything they have. A commandeur in a 109 G6 pins a fortress from dead ahead and watches the world turn into cotton and sparks, a waist gun shattering, a wing root fire pulsing like a heartbeat. He thinks, one more, just one. Then something flickers in his mirror. Too close and too steady to be a 47 low on gas. The Mustang arrives not in a shriek, but with a kind of terrible quiet. The 50s speak for 3 seconds, and the German watches oil bloom across his windscreen as if someone has crushed a black flower there. At Debden, Blakesley is ruthless with the new habit Doolittle demands. "Don't count guns," he'll bark. "Count airplanes destroyed." He sends sections ahead of the stream to cap assembly areas, places with names like Rhein, Achmer, Diepholz, where Jagdgeschwader now must get airborne in windows, measured in painful minutes. There, 5th and 6th kills of the day are taken over enemy airfields at gear-up height, where a wrong glance costs a man his name. Luftwaffe ground crews, once masterful at turning fighters in minutes, work under strafing passes that rip up fuel trucks and tangle runways with aluminum. The ACE system that had once minted morale now mints funerals, because the margin for one man's brilliance is anaerobic when the air over his house belongs to someone else. In the 357th's dispersal, a crew chief wipes down empty 50 cal links, while Anderson stands over a map with a pencil, the Merlin still pinging as it cools outside. They trace the arcade of the day, where fuel was dropped, where contrails thickened, where a 190 tried a vertical climb he could not afford. No one here thinks the Reich is beaten in the air overnight. But the conversation has shifted in flavor, from survival to prosecution. To the west, at Leiston, A green replacement pilot is learning that a Mustang can bring him home on fumes from Berlin. The lesson will kill some of them, because range tempts boldness like whiskey tempts bets. Yet the average will bend, because the machine and the doctrine support it. One of the bomber navigators will write later that he watched on March 6th a thing he could not quite explain. A pair of Mustangs that left the stream, left him, and arrowed into nothing ahead, as if chasing a cloud. 10 minutes later, the Luftwaffe attack that had been stacking for the frontal never really happened. It was like seeing a door close, he wrote. Not with a slam, but firmly. He didn't know that over the next 2 months, that door would be shut so many times that by D-Day, the Luftwaffe could barely raise a fist over Normandy. For the German aces, the reckoning is personal. Walter Usau will die in May under a swarm he flees too late, the Commodore trying to bring his machine home past the point of duty. Others will live to sit at wooden tables and argue about causes. Lack of fuel, green replacements, political interference that siphon men and attention into flak and miracle weapons. All of it is true. None of it changes the picture of March 1944. The day the Americans showed they could escort a bomb armada to Berlin and keep the wolves off it all the way back. Not just with muscle, but with method. Back in the air, late on March 6th, the bomber's stream turns west. Its bellies lightened, its crews rubber-legged and hollow-eyed. The contrails now tilt with the Earth's curve. Behind and above, Mustangs slot in, still alert, still with fuel in their bellies. A 4th FG flight slides past the nose of a battered fortress. The top turret gunner lifts a gloved thumb in his dome. The Mustang pilot tips a wing, not swaggering, just a small, quiet answer to a question that has hung for too long. The answer says, "We were there when you needed us, and we will be there again tomorrow." By April, the war's shape in the air has altered in a way you only notice when you count hours. It is not that the Luftwaffe ceases to exist. It fights with splinters and flames wherever it can. But that the Americans now decide, more days than not, which hours are German hours and which are theirs. The Mustangs are the hinge. Their range turns the clock face. Their doctrine fills the space that range creates. You can track it on a wall calendar in a cold operations hut. March 6th, Berlin. March 8th, Berlin again. March 9th, a return. In the margins, a clerk logs sideshows, fighter sweeps, shipping strikes, airfield busts. Somewhere else, a logistics sergeant checks off crates of 108-gallon paper tanks arriving by the thousands, their glue still sweet, their seams delicate in rain. A superintendent at the Packard plant walks the Merlin line and hears the rhythm of pistons that will set 100 altitudes to vibrating. Those are the banalities that make a doctrine more than a speech. The men feel it in their bones. Escort is no longer a slow-motion misery. It's a hunt in chapters. First, the join and the fuel check, the long, cold trudge east across the Zuiderzee. Then the free hunt ahead of the stream, where you kill some attackers before their runways cool. Then the dirty work around the bomber boxes, where you must dive and clear because flak blooms like black flowers, and 20 mm sparks start writing alphabets across bomb bay doors. Then, if fuel allows and leadership will permit, the kick out to the side to worry at a formation falling back for a second try. Turn home with the stream. Kill the odd hyena at the fringes. If you're very lucky and command is savage, you burn the last gallons strafing an airfield whose name you can't pronounce. Turning parked fighters and trucks into folded, smoking punctuation. From those hours flows something that has nothing to do with glamour and everything to do with amphibious math. The invasion of France, now sketched in growing detail, demands a sky under which barges can move and paratroopers can jump without being shredded by 109s and 190s. The spring's campaign of deep escort and free hunting becomes an industrial disassembly of the Luftwaffe's ability to mass. Pilots are killed. More damagingly, time is killed. Time that might have been used to train, to ferry fuel, to patch airstrips. When the Sturmgruppen are thrown in, they sometimes break bomber formations, yes. But they also die in seams. The Mustangs rip open. Their armored cockpits becoming iron coffins when a 50 burst finds a seam or a hinge. There are moments when the old danger flares bright. A Mustang pair chases too low and draws flak from a battery that folds one machine like a paper crane. A green pilot, drunk on speed and altitude, follows a 190 down through 5,000 feet of cloud and emerges alone over a forest spiked with masts, his fuel state a joke. The air war still eats men who are slow or unlucky. It never loses its appetite. In a Leisten-Nissen hut, you can smell the grief in the way Amasia. Pilot's name is erased from a door, chalk dust floating in a colder draft than before. But even grief confirms the structure of things now. The replacements will fly, the machine will bring them out and back, and the doctrine will make their bravery useful. The Luftwaffe tries countermoves. Rocket-armed 109s attempt standoff attacks. Sturmböcke come in welded to courage so stubborn you want to turn away. Fighters are vectored to meet the stream at odd angles from outlying fields in JG-300 and JG-301. In May, jets begin to whisper their promise in hangars where engineers work with cigarettes clasped in yellowed fingers. None of it can be made enough before June, because March and April have been what they have been. Hours owned by the Mustangs and their doctrine. Hours in which fuel moved by road becomes smoke at the end of a strafing pass. Hours in which a Staffelkapitän looks up at a sky full of contrails and understands finally that he cannot put metal in all those places at once. So we return to a day in late April, a smaller raid, a different target, the same long ribbon of silver. A fourth FG element slides past the lead box as it had 6 weeks earlier. The top turret gunner, another man, same gloves, lifts his thumb. The Mustang wing dips again, almost ritual now. On the ground, children in a field watch specks move across a high sky and hear the afternoon as a letter being written without end. The letter says, "Berlin is not a sanctuary. The road to Normandy is being paved in contrails. When D-Day comes and the sky over the beaches is thick with Dakota wing beats and the slow patience of Sterlings hauling gliders, the Luftwaffe will arrive in packets too small, too late, too harried." That fact is not born on June 6th. It is born here in March, when the Americans learn to bring fighters to Berlin, fight there, and bring them back with enough gas to fight again on the way home. It is born in Blakesley's jaw, in Doolittle's order, in the paper tanks that fall spinning like shed skins, in the Merlin's humming certainty that energy can be banked and spent like money, in a currency the Reich can no longer print. Outside a dispersal that smells of hot oil and damp earth, evening sinks toward the hedges. A crew chief wraps a Mustang's cowl with his knuckles and nods to himself at the sound. The pilot stands with his helmet on the wing root for a pillow and watches the last contrails unwind into dusk, his breath making ghosts in the cooling air. He will sleep, and he will wake, and tomorrow he will go east again. The laughter they once heard from the other side has gone quiet. In its place is the work, and the work is winning the sky an hour at a time.